When first stepping into the world of marathon training, I absorbed a ton of information about the marathon distance from a variety of people and sources. Today, I share 7 marathon training myths I used to believe and what I know now after completing 4 marathons. Let's get into it. The first myth was if you miss a training session, you'll lose fitness. Look, consistency in your marathon training is important, but it isn't the be-all and end-all if you do miss a few sessions here and there. From the start of my marathon training, I was constantly under the assumption that I'd suddenly lose all of the fitness that I'd worked to achieve if missing a single session in the week. This was a big red flag of mine. You're bound to experience some niggles and setbacks over the course of marathon training. We all do. But it's also an opportunity to continue your progress through means cross-training or even increasing your strength training too, to ensure that you're still making those deposits that get you towards the starting line. The only time we'll really lose fitness is if we're suddenly missing multiple sessions over the course of a few weeks without any structure or reason for taking an extended break. The second myth I used to believe was the quicker you complete a run, the faster you'll get. I remember during the peak periods of my own marathon training, suddenly thinking, okay, I've got a 15k run to get completed during the middle of the week. I'd rather get this done faster because obviously this will mean I will run a faster marathon time. That was a completely wrong assumption of mine. Marathon training is a long, slow, and patient process, and I only really started to learn about this in subsequent marathons like my second, third, and fourth. A majority of your mileage, particularly if it is your first ever marathon, should be done at a completely easy pace. You don't want to be overexerting yourself for no reason. While quality sessions like tempo runs, intervals, or hill sprints do matter in your training, they shouldn't form a majority of your training week. From my own personal experience, now training for Marathon 5, I've had a bit of a setback with my foot, but getting through just fine doing one quality session per week, which was an interval session, before suddenly building back up to my 2 quality sessions being an interval session and a tempo run, resuming my normal training load. The third myth that I used to believe was you only need to eat carbs until you're full when carb loading for a marathon. If you are a returning viewer, you'll know that the biggest marathon mistake I've ever made was not fueling myself enough before my first ever marathon. I remember vividly the days before the New York City Marathon, finding myself only really eating carbs until I felt full, but not really pushing myself any further to consume a bit more liquid carbs to really fuel my glycogen stores ready for the Sunday. Whether you're carb loading for 48 hours or upwards of 72 hours, you should be looking to aim for around 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight before your marathon. I've personally noticed a huge difference in my energy levels for marathons 2, 3, and 4 due to hitting my carb loading intake when, in comparison to my first marathon, I feel like I was barely hitting 400 grams of carbs per day before it. The fourth myth that I used to believe was you should be training to strict heart rate zones. Especially as a first-time marathoner, I was constantly comparing my higher heart rate to my other squad members who were also training for New York. Fast forward to almost 2 years now, and my heart rate is the least of my concerns when it comes to my training, finding as a result of staying consistent with my training, it's naturally just decreased overall, and finding I can hold quite faster paces for longer periods of time. As we enter the world of marathon training, heart rate and even training based off of your heart rate does become a factor that can be considered. Now look, heart rate training can definitely be useful, but particularly for first-time marathoners, it can actually overcomplicate things, and training for a marathon in the first place is already complicated enough. As someone now coaching 12 people to run the New York City Marathon later this year, heart rate is one of those factors that I don't really consider here, finding I use rate of perceived exertion to measure their intensity levels for their training runs. For those of you curious as to what rate of perceived exertion is, essentially it's measuring an intensity level yourself on what it feels like out of 10. For something like intervals, for example, you're looking to hit maybe around the 7 to 9 RPE range when it comes to intensity. The fifth myth that I used to believe was I couldn't train for a marathon whilst working full time. Before training, I was a regular gym goer for the previous 2 years, heading in around 5 to 6 times per week. But that suddenly changed to running 4 to 5 times a weekend, only really having 2 sessions worth in the gym. This was quite a shift for me, not only physically, but the fact that I had to actually incorporate more time to exercise into my routine, finding that In a way, adjusting to marathon training really was a shock to the system. At first, I was complaining about my entire new schedule around my full-time work hours, but gradually with some small changes like going to bed a little earlier, getting up a little earlier, I made running a priority in 2023. And look, I'll say this too, massive respect to runners out there juggling families, kids, life, and everything in between. You're the real MVPs here, and I've got it way easier in comparison. I see you, keep up the good work. The sixth myth was believing that I couldn't actually complete the marathon distance. Oh yeah, it was the first thing that I thought about when I found out I'd be running the 2023 New York City Marathon. How exactly was I going to do that? And it's why we spent upwards of 20 plus weeks when training for our first marathon to build our body up to handle the mammoth task that is completing a marathon. But with each small deposit compounding over a long period of time, I got to the starting line of New York with confidence that I could actually achieve the distance. As everyone says, trust in the process and trust in your training. And if someone like me with no long distance endurance training previously can do it, you can too. The final myth I used to believe was you can't walk during a marathon. This was the biggest one I continued to believe right up until the end of the marathon, thinking that if I walked any section of the marathon that I was a failure. I walked a lot because my race didn't go to plan. I still finished. I got my marathon medal just like everyone else, and I've gone on to smash my first marathon time. You are still just as much of a runner, even if you walk during stages of the marathon. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. So there we have it, friends. Everyone starts somewhere, and these were just a few of the things that I got wrong when training for my first marathon. Hopefully you won't have to endure these mistakes that I had to learn. If you're training for your first marathon, let me know down in the comments below what you're most unsure about. More than happy to continue the conversation down there. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. I'm Jack, and I'll see you next time. Catch up.